Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. As you may have noticed, the weekend episode I was trying to get out did not come out. I was on vacation. I was actually with my sister, with Celia, who I've been recapping the Blackbird show with, and we were planning on covering it, but we watched it at different times, and families around, and it's just very inconvenient to try to get anything done. So we will have that conversation for you this upcoming week. So we will get back to 2 episodes a week, but that's okay. I did see that we had a lot of listeners on last week's episode, the Better Call Saul episode. So maybe more people had time to listen to that episode while they were waiting for another one. And just a quick show note that we are wrapping up Better Call Saul next week. This is the finale.
Can't believe it.
Incredible, right? So close to the end. Following that, Sona and I will be giving you a recap of the season of Only Murders in the Building. I think there's only 4 episodes left of that show. And then we will have, of course, give you a recap and review of the finale, which is the week after Better Call Saul wraps up, I believe. I will be separately covering the new Game of Thrones spinoff show, House of the Dragon, which begins on the 21st. And then on the 30th, Sona, we begin our coverage of the another psychological thriller set in a mental hospital. Not so, I guess maybe coincidentally with Blackbird, or maybe intentionally, who knows? And that will be on Hulu, and that will begin on the 30th, and it's called The Patient. So just some things to look forward to. So make sure you subscribe so you know when all that becomes available, all those upcoming episodes. And beyond that, so now I wanted to catch up on a few things from previous conversations we had that you may find interesting.
Let's do it.
The first thing I wanted to bring up is that, speaking of the Cinnabon connection with Better Call Saul, next Monday, everybody, if you are a fan of Cinnabon will be giving away, they have a snack size version of the Cinnabon called Center of the Roll. So they will be giving away a free Center of the Roll. All you have to do is install the Cinnabon app on your phone. And next Monday, the day of the finale, you can go to any Cinnabon and get a free Center of the Roll, which is, of course, the best part of the Cinnabon, by the way.
I'll take your word for it.
Speaking of Cinnabons, when we were down the shore, my nephew went out and walked to the bakery, which is maybe half a mile from the house we're staying at. And they make cinnamon rolls there. And he bought a box of cinnamon rolls for everybody in the house.
How nice of him.
So yet another connection to this. He's not watching Better Call Saul, but if I wanted to get a little taste of a cinnamon bun, given the fact of this conversation, I got my chance this weekend.
I just think you can't beat the smell. I don't even like eating them, but the smell is so delicious.
There is something special about those Cinnabon, by the way. Maybe it's just because you're so in proximity to all the ingredients at once. Because having the box in the house really did not have that kind of effect.
It's the smell. I'm telling you.
Absolutely. One more thing pertaining to the cinnamon roll that I did want to call out here, by the way. If you take the deal of getting the free Center of the Bun, you also get a month of free AMC Plus. So anybody who wants to catch up on, maybe next week, I'll have some recommendations for things that are AMC Plus. One of the main things I could say, if you are a horror movie fan, AMC Plus gets you Shudder. And of course, Shudder has basically once every single horror movie pretty much, goes through its first run on Netflix or whatever, it ends up on Shudder. So maybe I'll give you a list of things you may want to catch up on there. And of course, AMC Plus also has some interesting content. Dark Winds, for example, is a show that I've only watched about half of, but it is pretty good. So maybe I'll put a list together for next week if you do want to subscribe for AMC Plus, or at least just take the free month and catch up on some things you may have missed. The next thing I wanted to mention to you, Sona, that I've done some research on, is the strange broken tape motif of the most recent episodes of the start. So here is something that you probably didn't notice, and I didn't notice until I did some research. Every season of Better Call Saul up until now has had 10 episodes.
Okay.
Until this season, which has 13, right? And another thing I did not know, but every single season, for the first episode, we have the video play at the beginning of the spider crawling out of the bottle. And every single episode, when we get to the 10th episode, we have the coffee mug tipping over, right? So basically, every first episode has the same intro video. Every 10th episode has the same. Every second, third, everything in between, right? I'm not giving you every single one of them. But basically, every single episode in every single season has that same intro, except that the video is breaking down every season a little more, a little more. So they've been doing this since the beginning of the show. Yep. And the reason that the tape is broken now for the 3 most recent episodes is because they've never been beyond 10. So they basically do not have video to show for those 3 episodes.
So interesting.
And one last thing I want to call out here. I have not seen anything about this. I was taking my notes and watching Talking Saul, by the way, which I have a few notes that I want to mention on that as well, on some of the feedback from the cast and crew. I basically, while I was taking my final notes of the night, the episode starts playing again. And I noticed that at the very end of the tape, it's like something out of The Ring, by the way. At the very end of the tape, there's a figure that we see just for a split second. So once again, I think we're getting teased for something that's coming next week. So that's all my research and doodads and
stuff.
Hopefully entertaining for everybody. All right, so let's get into the episode itself. This one written and directed by Vince Gilligan
himself.
That's right. And next
week,
the man himself, but the man himself in this case is actually Peter Gould, who is the showrunner on this show, and he will write and direct the last episode, next week's episode.
Okay.
But here we have Vince Gilligan directing this one, obviously given a whole episode to himself. This one is called Waterworks, and we see 2 different Waterworks of type here in this episode. Maybe more, maybe something else I missed as well. And we begin with Saul in the Breaking Bad timeline, bouncing his ball against the wall. We see his, once again, we kind of see all these like little details in the office.
Yeah, I think it's the We the People, yeah.
And he's bouncing his rubber ball against there. We also see his diploma.
American Samoa, which involved a discussion in my house about whether he maybe had submitted an official change of name in order to get the diploma.
Interesting.
Name Saul Goodman.
Didn't think about that, but that's a very good point. We do see the same weird intro, like I mentioned before, but this time at the very last second, everybody, if you have to go back to watch it, check out that weird figure we see in clear detail, by the way. So unlike this broken tape motif, we see this like one striking black and white figure just for a split second there at the end. It's a little creepy, once again, going to that David Lynch territory that the show has only dipped its toe into recently. And we see that he's basically just bouncing that ball and wasting time. And he's finally tells Francesca, send her in. I actually didn't realize at that moment that this was explicitly Kim. I thought he was just kind of, dealing with receiving the divorce paperwork. But it turns out, and we'll see later in the episode, that it is explicitly Kim there in the flesh to sign the paperwork. Then we transition back into the black and white world, but we are not picking up from the cliffhanger from last week. We are seeing a brunette Kim living her Palm Coast sprinklers life down in Florida. And indeed, this is...
I mean, this might be worse than the Cinnabon lives.
I think I might agree with that. Maybe the worst part of this whole entire thing is the perfunctory sex they have with the yep.
Just
yikes.
All of it just so drab, so boring, so unengaging, just very depressing just to watch, honestly.
Yes, it does make me think though, as I'm watching this, that if you just kind of took the most mundane vignettes of anybody's life, wouldn't all their lives look like this? Which would be a little depressing to think about. But
well, we both have small children at home. So I think in a way,
yes, that's a good point.
Like, I wish a day could be that dull, but maybe in the future, I'll agree with you. In this stage of life, there's more liveliness than I care for on some days.
And all of these little vignettes that we see here, and there's so many of them, so many little details of really grinding you down, like really appreciating how mundane and rote her life has become. Are there any of these things that really stand out? One I would call out. First of all, I mentioned that we're suddenly in Severance somehow, the show Severance.
How so?
Well, just suddenly being stuck in the drudgery of an office all of a sudden.
Oh, well, yes.
And although, I guess you could say the same thing about The Office, the show The Office, if you want to go in a more mundane version of this. The one I wanted to call out here that I thought was kind of a funny detail was when they were all sitting around having the conversation about drugs. Whatever happened to crack? Did people just stop smoking it? And then they start going on and like, oh no, the kids today, they're all doing ecstasy. What's the one where they suck on pacifiers? That's ecstasy. They're like, if an adult came in and bought a pacifier, I would just call the cops. They must be on ecstasy.
The thing is, okay, I understand what you're saying in that, in a way, these are the types of conversations we are all having every day.
Yes.
But I guess, like, just in my life, maybe I'm lucky that I just have livelier personalities around me.
Yeah.
So even these day to day humdrum conversations are more interesting in my life than they are portrayed here, right? Like
Yeah.
the stupid mayonnaise thing about whether
Yes.
to use the Miracle Whip because they were out of the mayonnaise, the ecstasy thing, the what kind of cake should we get? Like
Yes.
all of these conversations, yes, they are everyday conversations, but maybe I'm just having them with livelier people because they're much more engaging in my everyday life than they are in this depiction.
Not to go too much further down this rabbit hole, but don't you find that oftentimes that is the case? Not necessarily with office conversations, although I have definitely been in offices where the conversations, because you're trying to come up with commonality with people that honestly you have no commonality with. So it usually is extremely mundane stuff. It's like having the conversation at the bus stop about the weather, right? Because what else do you have in common with this random person? I often feel to have this experience when I'm at like a birthday party for my daughter, right? Where all of a sudden you have to talk to all these people and like, what do I really have in common with these people? The only thing you can talk about is these most mundane of all possible topics, right?
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I think that's the reason that sometimes in the office, right, you're grateful for that one guy who's always joking or
Yes.
whatever it may be,
Oh
because
yeah,
it
absolutely.
it adds some energy to a space that might all otherwise be completely devoid of any energy whatsoever.
Even the person who's like a complete mess in the office, who's always taking things too personally, making everything into a drama, because at least then everybody's going like, "What's up with him today?"
Yes,
Right? Like
something to talk about.
at least something, right?
Yes.
And one last thing on that, which total digression, but I do find it funny that I've had relationships with people where I'm very close with them at work because the whole relationship is so based on the gossiping about work or the dramas around work. And then once you leave work, you really don't have that much in common with them anymore. Like you try to stay friends, but it kind of drift apart.
Yes, that's true.
Anyway, so we've all lived this life at some point. I did love the mayonnaise, like you mentioned. I do love her. She does not like Miracle Whip. It's too sweet. And basically, she writes copy for this catalog. So really think about Kim Wexler. And like you said, this is this crazy, maybe a self-imposed purgatory she's put herself into, but she seems to be, we have to assume, very unfulfilled in this life.
Yeah, I think in some ways she is punishing herself for everything that came before by finding the most drama free life that she could possibly find
Yeah.
and not ever engaging anything that could possibly come anywhere near that aspect of her personality that likes excitement.
Right. Right.
But boy, is it grim.
Yes. But we do get to see the call, right? We were kind of teasing last week. I hope we get to hear
Mm-hmm.
that call, and we do hear it. And, surprisingly, when we saw how violently Saul reacted to it, it does not seem that violent. I guess her stoicism is the violence that he perceives in her reaction to him, right?
I thought you might want to know I'm still alive. Yep. I'm still out here, still getting away with it. Feds couldn't find their own ass with both hands in a proctologist.
You shouldn't be calling me.
Oh, hey, you're awake.
You shouldn't be calling.
Why not? What am I, tying up the line for important irrigation business? I mean, come on, Kim, say something. You can call me an asshole. Yell at me. Just let me know you still got a pulse. Just say something.
You want me to say something?
Yeah.
You should turn yourself in.
Do what?
You heard me. I don't know what kind of life you've been living, but it can't be much.
Set the pot to the kettle? What? That is really rich. You preaching to me? See, you have no idea what I did or didn't do, okay? And why don't you turn yourself in? Seeing as how you're the one with the guilty conscience, huh? What is stopping you? Bring's in the ground. Mike's in the ground. Lalo's in the ground, apparently. You don't have to hold back on my account. They can only hang me once. So go ahead. Spill your guts. Put on your hair shirt. See what it gets you. Kim, why are we even talking about this? We're both too smart to throw our lives away for no reason. I only wanted to... Kim? Kim.
I'm glad you're alive.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, I did understand or I related to like how offended he was at the idea that she's telling him you should turn yourself in.
Yeah.
As if, and I mean, this all plays out later,
Yes.
but in that moment, like it just seemed like a little bit sanctimonious for someone who's not perfect herself,
Yes, yes. Well, and I mean, I guess that is why she does what she does.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's very much Kim's thing as well, right? Where she somehow can dodge her own self for only so long, because then when she's confronted with it, she has to take action at least. So we find out it's been 6 years since the divorce, right?
Mm-hmm.
And her biting last remark, I don't think she's trying to be cruel here, but the whole idea of just saying like, I'm glad you're alive, and hangs up the phone. I actually think she means that.
I think so too.
But he takes offense to that, obviously. Just he perceives it as her coldness, which once again, as we've learned from Kim, that coldness masks a lot of other stuff, right? I like Tammy's birthday shenanigans going on in the background, by the way. I actually jumped when that woman walks into the room to tell her the cake's ready to be cut. I was just not like, I was just like so much in her mindset when she hangs up the phone. And then suddenly they're like, Kim, she's like, ah.
Was it vanilla or strawberry? Did we ever find out?
Oh, I don't even know. It's hard to tell in black and white. And then, of course, like you said, this all pays off that we see Kim flies into Albuquerque. And it's very interesting when she shows up at the courthouse and she sees that defense attorney preparing her client, making him wear a tie, tucking in his shirt, wear a jacket. Of course, all
her old life.
Yeah, exactly. So the pangs of recognition.
And the shot of her driving into the parking lot was nice too. Looking in the booth real quick.
The empty booth. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just a reminder that booth is now empty, and it holds on that very interestingly. And then she goes and makes a statement at the courthouse, and then goes and presents it to Cheryl. This scene was so uncomfortable. And Cheryl reads through, we see snippets. She confesses to everything, every single detail of what happened. What do you think about this whole scene? The most painful moment in this whole entire thing is that Kim basically saying, hey, he didn't suffer.
It all happened in an instant, and he didn't suffer.
He didn't suffer. The lies you two made up, the picture you painted, that's all he is now. That's all anybody remembers.
I want to change that.
What happens now? Will you be tried? Will you go to jail?
I don't know.
You're a lawyer, right? You're a great one, Howard said. How could you not know?
Bernalillo County has my affidavit. It's up to the district attorney whether to prosecute. And she may not.
Why?
There's no physical evidence. No remaining witnesses other than my ex-husband, assuming he's still alive.
I could sue you in civil court. I could take everything you've got.
Yeah.
Why are you doing this?
The way you tarnish his reputation, it's all anybody thinks of him. And I think that is very, very biting.
Yeah, I think it was spot on, right? That never mind that exact moment, but this guy felt like he was losing his mind probably for several weeks beforehand, which is like very disconcerting. So, and then, the fallout from all of it is as awful as the murder was. It's not really about that in retrospect.
Exactly. But if he had survived, at least he could have rehabilitated his career, or the perceptions people had of him. But of course, this is the punctuation on his whole life, which is very sad. And of course, it all comes crashing down Waterworks on Kim, where she's taking the bus back to the airport, and she just breaks down, right? She just has a very...
This is really a tangent, but before we knew where this scene was heading and they showed her on the rental car bus, my husband and I had a conversation about how much we hate the rental car bus. That it's just, it's just either you have finally arrived from an awful flight to your destination and you just want to get to the hotel. And it's like, now this, like wait in line for the rental car bus, get on the bus, load your luggage, wait in the line to get the car. or your vacation is done and you just want to get home and you're stuck on the rental car bus. And so we have this whole conversation and then she bursts into tears. I thought that the only thing that could make this experience more awful
Exactly.
is that the person you're sitting next to is now hysterically crying for some reason. But that's a complete tangent. Yes, the drama of the moment was still there, that this has all been building up for such a long time for her.
I did like the little detail that at the end, as she's really getting more and more hysterical and crying, that this hand comes in, this old woman's hand comes in just to give her a little pat on the arm. And maybe think of two things. One is like how sweet that is. And also I think about when I've seen that in public, when that has actually happened, not exactly this, but similar, that it almost feels like the old lady is there for that purpose. She's the only person who can get away with it, right? You don't want like a teenage kid doing that. You don't want like some 40-year-old guy. The old woman seems to be like compassionate and also non-threatening enough to provide that condolence. And the old women will have their revenge, I should say, in this episode as well, right? By the end.
In a big way.
So we come back from this commercial break, actually, where she's crying on the bus. And now we jump to that cliffhanger where we left off. And Saul's breaking into the house of Cancer Man. And he gets all the usual stuff. He even finds his passwords. He does everything he needs to do to get out of there. But he doesn't get out of there. And it just once again doubles down on something we were discussing last week, where I feel like he wants to get caught. Don't you think he wants to get caught?
Yeah, I think we're kind of seeing the different ways that Saul and Kim are punishing themselves for everything that came before. His behavior here is so reckless.
Yes.
And so unadvisable that it could only be, on some level purposeful, I think. I mean, overall in this episode, I can't remember if we've ever seen such an awful side of Saul. Someone who is not perfect by any means, but I'm not sure we have ever seen it this bad.
What's crazy about this too, and maybe this is something I'm just realizing now, is the intention of the filmmakers here, that we see this fighting duality within Kim and within Saul, because like you mentioned, he puts himself intentionally into the riskiest position he can, which is this kind of self-flagellation, like you mentioned. And then once he's in there, he's cornered. He literally multiple times in this episode threatens to kill somebody to escape that situation, but a situation that he has put himself in. So that battle, this deadly battle, is happening inside himself, right? Because if the self-preservation side of him was winning this war, he would never put himself in that situation. And then, of course, the self-destructive side is putting himself in harm's way, but then like literally willing to kill to get out of it. It's like, you did this to yourself. And I think that is this part of this psychology he cannot reconcile. And I think Kim, on the other hand, her better angels are winning out, right? Like she's basically saying, I'm not going to do a half measure. I'm going to do all of this, right? So I think maybe we're seeing those two sides of these two personas playing out in very different ways.
I think so too. Although in fairness, I thought he was just going to conk the guy on the head with the dog's ashes, not necessarily kill him. Like just make him pass out.
Yes. I mean, I don't think, yes. I mean, what I would say to that is that, taking somebody who is inebriated already and drugged and conking him on the head, you are endangering their lives in a way, so it's tricky to say the least, because at that point, just the stupidity of it, once you knock this guy out, even if he survives, all he has to do is tell whoever shows up, the police, the events of the night, and can still turn him, still give himself away. So there's
True.
So it raises the question of how far he's willing to go. Do we want to go back to Saul skulking around the house when he kind of, I don't know if I could cut it out if it's not interesting, but what did you think about him? First of all, he goes back, he's about to make a clean getaway. He goes back in, goes to drink some of the whiskey, hangs out upstairs, takes some of his watches, takes his watches. This is evidence.
What is that even about? Yeah.
Yes. What is that?
I mean, it's not something that we've seen Saul be interested in doing that type of stuff before. And it just seems mean and petty for somebody that does not deserve this whole situation at all, like adding insult to injury. It makes sense that the character is hitting a rock bottom, but it didn't make any sense for someone, as we've discussed, has any sense of self-preservation to be doing this type of stuff.
Right. And I just think about the fact that think about it, even from a practical stand of view, even from a pragmatic point of view, how insane this is. Because if you've just gone in there and you're trying to steal their identity, and now you're proving that, no, I took his watches also, then it's like, how are you going to sell that? Like, he's going to assume, for example, that, something got compromised. You're basically diminishing the value of the identity theft if he knows for a fact that someone was in there. But I guess he did that as soon as he broke the window too, right? So at that point, he probably would be smart enough to freeze all his accounts anyway. So yeah, it just seems so self-sabotaging. Just yet another example of that. I do like this whole thing. We had it teased in last week's episode, and this show is always a show that plays with our expectations. We saw the police arrive. We're wondering what is going to happen here. And of course, it turns out to be something really hysterically funny. That first of all, they simply are hanging out there, complaining about the food they picked up at the taco stand, probably in the middle of the night. I mean, at this point, we know it's like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So can't be very like, I'm not picking up fish tacos. My God, fish tacos at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Taco in Nebraska, as his partner pointed out.
Right.
What are you doing, man?
In the middle of the night. In the middle of the night. So yeah, that was a horrible decision. First of all, 1,500 miles away from the ocean. And then, of course, we see that Jeff in the car is panicking. He's worried. He thinks the cops are there for him. And of course, he jumps on the accelerator and crashes into a car right there in the neighborhood. Very hilarious payoff to this whole entire thing.
I thought for a moment that Jeff was actually purposefully trying to cause a distraction by crashing into the car. But it turns out that he's just that reckless, I guess.
No, I don't know. That would be really dumb because the crash is so close to the house. I was thinking if they're following him and he wants to actually give Saul a getaway, then what he would do would just be to drive around the corner, because then the cops would pursue him. And then, by the time they pulled him over, he could even like pull out into another neighborhood. And then the cops will be like, hey, didn't you see my lights? And like, oh, I thought you were just trying to pass me or something, right? But basically, you could get them a mile away from the house, not crash like in front of the house, which is a very very bad place to crash your car if you're trying to be incognito. So then we go back into the Breaking Bad timeline, more or less, actually, because I guess this is still pre-Breaking Bad, but we do see the continuation of that sequence where Kim signs the paperwork. Saul at this point is, once again, we know Saul, he is incapable of dealing with his emotions. So he has shut down completely and is, will not reconcile, won't even have a moment of reconciliation here with Kim, just blows her off like no big deal. But of course, we know he's really hurting inside, and that's it, blows her off. And we do get to see her interact with Aaron Paul. I think he does a better job here of channeling.
I agree.
And I guess he's being directed by Vince Gilligan, his old school Breaking Bad author. So I guess, maybe they do a better job of getting into the Jesse mind frame. And I thought this was interesting. She asks, hey, my friend, he just came here because of the TV commercial. You don't pick a doctor because of a TV commercial. What do you think about this guy?
How is this any different? Anyway, this guy, any good?
When I knew him, he was.
And this also, we talked about it, but we didn't just tie it back in. The idea of the Waterworks, right? This is the second time now.
Yes.
So we saw her burst into tears on the rental bus, which turning on the Waterworks. And then we see this actual torrential rainstorm in the middle of the desert as Jesse Pinkman is pointing out, why the hell is it pouring like this in the middle of the desert?
I thought this was a desert.
Yeah.
And then, we get to the end here. We see the fallout from everything that happened in front of that house. Saul has taken a bus home. Interesting bus riding motif in this episode. Jeff calls Dad. Saul is waiting for the call. He tries to do his, usual magic when he's waiting for the call to come. And that almost works. It's only off by a few seconds. Jeff calls Dad, which of course is Saul. Saul gives him some sound advice saying, hey, look, if you rob the house, there's nothing in your car, etc. and so forth, right? So there's many reasons to say that this guy is innocent. So if he just sits tight, he will probably be okay. It is suspicious, of course, that he dropped this guy off at the house. And then, X number of hours later, he is still there. So he tells Jeff to sit tight. And he goes, you know what? I can't bail you out. I need your mom to do it. It's going to look suspicious if I do it. Sounds better if it comes from your family. I'm going to go talk to your mom right now. Calls Marion on the phone, Carol Burnett's character. And something he says when he seems to know too much about the law. makes her suspicious. So she decides to break out the PC again, now that she has that handy dandy laptop. And she does some Googling and she puts her headphones in so she doesn't hear when Saul arrives. I did want to call out that on the ride over, Saul is singing The Tide is High by Blondie. Very funny details here. We've all done this before where he immediately starts singing The Tide is High in the wrong place. And then he just shuts up because he realizes he missed the part of the song he was supposed to sing.
I totally missed that.
The second thing I want to point out here, I love these little details that Gilligan puts into his shows, by the way. And the second thing I want to point out is that earlier when he was singing Brandy in that karaoke bar, I was like, oh my God, he's playing up how bad he is. No, he's a horrible singer. I don't know if Odenkirk himself is this bad a singer, but boy, this is as bad as you can get at karaoke, I think. Another interesting thing I want to call out is when he does get to Carol Burnett's house, to Marion's, and he finds out what she's looking at. She has discovered that he's Saul Goodman. And he first thinks, oh, Jeff said something. And she goes, no, I just put in con man and Albuquerque and you came up right away, which I think is awesome, which is probably true, right? He must be extremely famous nationwide. The other interesting thing is we only see the ad reflected in his eyeglasses, but the ads are in color. I thought was interesting considering that, everything obviously is in black and white in this sequence.
Yes, that was interesting.
I don't think it represents anything more than the fact that it's just like a little artistic flourish to show that time frame is still in color, right? And theoretically, in his mind, right, like his whole life has been drab since that moment. And yeah, so that leads us to the very last moments, I should say, of the episode where Carol Burnett is about to push her life alert button. Saul has pulled the phone out of the wall to prevent her from making a phone call to the police and starts winding it around his hands.
Yes.
Ominously, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then takes the life alert necklace away from her. But she just says, I trusted you. And this somehow melts this fugue state he's been in, this like evil Saul persona that he's been in for a while. And he steps away from her. And of course, she pushes the button and triggers the call. But yeah, what did you think about this last moment and his change of heart? And do you think he was really going to kill her?
But that's the question, right? And in the moment, I did. And I thought, like, again, wow, this is the ugliest side of this character that we have ever seen, that he could even consider doing something like this. For some reason, in retrospect, I feel like he wasn't going to and was just trying to scare her.
Yeah.
And I don't really know what shifted my thinking in that regard. But in the moment, I definitely felt like he was willing to do it, and I was horrified by it.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to assume that it had to be just purely a threat, because one of the things I thought about is if she gets killed at this moment, who are they going to go after? His whole persona is blown up, basically. Like, it's not like he can go back to working at Cinnabon because Jeff will turn him in, or Jeff's friend will turn him in if not Jeff, right? Jeff's going to be like, I know who did this. He works at Cinnabon in the mall, right? So, and then of course, once they get there, they're going to know he's Saul. So it's not rocket science to connect the dots here. If he threatens her, he's only buying himself an hour or two, because even if he threatens her into not pushing the button at that moment, and then what is he going to do? Get her to go bail out Jeff before he talks?
Yeah.
Then while she's at the police station, she's just going to be like, I'm safe right now. I'm going to go talk to a police officer. What does he buy himself? Minutes, right? So it's not, maybe he's just doing that calculation. But I do see him soften. So I do think he...
as I'm talking about it with you, I think the way the rest of the scene played out is what made me think that it was just a threat, because he does back off and he does run away. I think, something about the way he responded to her after that moment made me think like he was just trying to see if he could scare her into shutting up. But once it was clear that couldn't be done, then like cut his losses and get out.
Yeah.
Now, listen, I'm still the good friend you thought I was. Okay, Jeff understands me, Buddy understands me, and you will too. Just have to, keep things on an even keel. All right? What have you got there? Put that down. Final warning. I trusted you.
Marion, this is Valerie, the life alert. Are you okay?
I do agree that, I think that was just a threat and he was just trying to look imposing, and then partially this calculation, partially just seeing her as a person there again, this person that he really did seem to have befriended at some point. his better angels are in control momentarily. So we get a moment from next episode, which is the wrecked car, and we hear Saul doing the vacuum code in his mind, right? So what do you think this hints at for the finale?
I don't know. Can he disappear himself again from?
Is he going to call the vacuum man again? I think he's definitely going to try, right?
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't seem to have many other. Well, I don't know. Maybe given the amount of time that's elapsed and this new identity, maybe it would be possible for him to go to Canada and start over. I don't know. Just picking the nearest border.
He is close to Canada, which is probably part of the reason he picked where he is. But I mean, they have extradition, right? But I mean, he would still buy him some time. He could always disappear again while he's up there during the extradition process. I mean, one scenario is he dies, which of course would be one ending. Another ending, and maybe a more fitting ending, I think, would be for him to be disappeared. We see him in Canada, let's say, for example, under some other identity, and an even more drab and non-functional version of his life. And, maybe apropos to Saul, he refuses to accept blame for what he's done, and he's just living in this smaller and smaller world, the smaller and smaller box he's putting himself into. I think that would actually be maybe more apropos to the show, but remains to be seen what happens. Do you think we'll see Kim again? Do you think we'll see Walt again? I think we will see Walt again. Maybe, I mean, obviously in flashback, right? You would assume they would bring him in a little bit more.
I do think we'll see Walt again. I feel like that might be it for Kim, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. They give her a lot of screen time.
Yeah. And I mean, this episode was half about her,
yes.
Right? And if not more than half.
Yep.
And I think this was like, her farewell of like, this is the path that she's chosen. And they kind of made clear that even though she came clean, it's very unlikely there will be any consequences for that.
Right.
So she's just going to go back to the banality of her Florida office space life.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think they made it pretty clear in the way the episode is written to say the DA can pursue charges, but they probably won't, because how do you make this case? It's going to be an expensive case that has no evidence. Even if she confesses to it, what are they going to get her on? And then what Cheryl says to her, she's like, I can sue you and take everything you have. But Cheryl's like a millionaire. She inherited a chunk of this business that, of course, was successful and maybe even more successful now. And what does Kim have? She gets she's probably living check to check. So, okay, yeah, you can take everything she has. What's that? It's not not much satisfaction in doing that, right? Other than just torment Kim. But it's like, well, how much, that's going to get boring after a year of her knowing that she's eating tuna sandwiches every day. That's not really, how satisfying is that going to be? It's just, it's not going to fix the underlying wound. Going back to maybe the best episode, my opinion, the best episode we've seen of the show, maybe ever, but definitely this season, which was that kind of moment after Lalo dies, that episode where everybody's kind of recuperating. And we see Nacho's dad say, vengeance itself just has its own cost in a way, right? Because you can never get past whatever your wound is. And that's the same thing, right? What's Cheryl going to do? Be vindictive forever?
Right.
So anyway, yeah, interesting. I didn't love this. I mean, I shouldn't say I didn't love this episode. I should say that I don't think, this is just my gut feeling now, I don't think at this point that the show is going to nail the landing in the way that Breaking Bad did. It's not that kind of show, I don't think. I could be completely wrong about this. I would love to have one of these kind of iconic final episodes. But for me, having that episode, the one after Lalo dies, is so exceptional that for me, that is really, in a way, the finale of the show, right? It's just like kind of seeing everybody in this moment before we know everything's going to go horribly wrong, right? But we just kind of see them all in this kind of moment of reflection. And that's the kind of show that is, I think, Saul is at its best. So I'm already happy with what we've gotten. I don't have expectations that the finale is going to knock my socks off, but I'd love for that to be the case.
I don't think this is a show that leaves you with that satisfied feeling,
right,
that Breaking Bad did, of like tying up loose ends and ticking all the boxes. I think this show dwells in that uncertainty of having loose ends and unanswered questions.
Yep.
So yeah, I agree with you. Like, I think Breaking Bad was one of the all-time most satisfying finales to watch.
Right.
Just because it packaged it all up, everything you've been watching for years. I don't think we're going to get that here.
Yeah. And like you said, Breaking Bad is that kind of show where it was, about this mundane guy who turns into Scarface over the course of the series, and then we get to see all those aspects of it, right? He reconciles with his family. He gets to be the big, he gets to have this very elaborate and crazy massacre at the end. He dies for all, and we knew it inevitably he had to die, but he died in his own terms instead of just wasting away due to cancer, something he was terrified of. So it kind of checks all those boxes. And to your point, I don't see those check boxes even in a show like Better Call Saul. So I don't know how you're going to tick them off, because that, like, if anything, we wanted to see Lalo die. We knew he was going to die, and he did die. That already happened. Right?
There you have it.
So the show has to kind of give us something else at the end. But like I said, that episode after Lalo's death is so exceptional that I'm already very satisfied with what the show's given us. And I thought this was a very good episode, by the way, still. So
I agree.
All right. A few things from Talking Saul. I find this very funny. First of all, was that Rhea Seehorn was on there via Zoom. Mm-hmm. Oh, they interviewed everybody, by the way. They interviewed Jonathan Banks, and he was just, really nice. I mean, I recommend people, I think this will probably end up on YouTube, their Talking Saul segment. And I just thought it was really nice to have him say that, like, he goes like, you only have an experience in your life that changes your life so fundamentally, so late in your life. And he goes, I'm so beyond like lucky for everything that's happened to me. Just really sweet. And Tony Dalton talking about, like, he's so honored to have had this type of role. He goes, who can get this kind of role in their lifetime? And then, of course, that was pre-recorded, and everybody, Vince Gilligan was there, and Odenkirk was there, Rhea Seehorn was there and Peter Gould, of course, was there as well. And they're just talking about how incredible, just once they cast Tony Dalton, that, like, it just changed that character so fundamentally. They make the analogy that he's like James Bond, right? Mm-hmm. As opposed to like our usual, like, psychopathic Salamancas, right? And they go, you have somebody like Tony Dalton, who just, like, personally is so charismatic. And of course you have to use that as part of the character, and just like how iconic that is, of course. And of course they talked to Giancarlo Esposito. He said that he's talked to Tony Dalton about, having a whole career and then having this kind of being like a button late in your career. And once again, how lucky they are. So anyway, just really everybody, just a love fest. And they just seem to be these people who really loved working together. So it was really just great. Aww. But Rhea Seehorn, tying into the episode, did talk about how she lives up in New Hampshire, by the way, where she's speaking from. And she said that the Miracle Whip thing is her own thing. She was like, went on a whole tirade about how Miracle Whip is too sweet. Can't make tuna salad with Miracle Whip. It's too sweet. And then she, like, even boasted of a local New Hampshire mayonnaise that she put to the camera. Like, she actually, like, gave him some free promotion. The funniest thing that happens this whole entire interview, by the way, is that Odenkirk says that, of course, he's upset with her. She's giving him nothing on that phone call, and he hasn't seen her in a year and a half. And then Peter Gould, everybody on the set basically says 6 years. And he goes, oh, 6 years. That makes sense. He goes, I don't actually watch this show. It's very funny that he got the time frame wrong. Like, everybody on set, including, like, you just yell at him, like, 6 years. It's in this episode. It's in the very episode we just watched. So I do recommend that. Check that out. It's available on cable, and I think it's gonna be on their YouTube channel. I've seen previous episodes of this on their YouTube. Nothing too deep in understanding the behind the scenes, and of course they're probably playing their cards close to the vest because they're afraid of leaking stuff that isn't going to pay off till next week. So, and I'm sure they'll have more to say then. All right, so very much looking forward to next week's episode. Of course, the finale of this really great show. Hopefully something really surprising. I don't know where they're going with this, so I assume I'll be surprised. Whether I'm happy or not, I'll be surprised. So. All right, so thanks again for the conversation, Sona.
Thank you.